to call our meeting to order. Thanks to everyone for joining us. Hello, bonjour, and bienvenue. Thank you for joining our virtual meeting of the CPATA Board of Directors. As a reminder, if you'd like to listen to today's meeting in French, you can access the simultaneous interpretation by clicking the globe icon in the bottom of your window and selecting your language. As we come together today from many different regions of our vast nation, I'd like to begin by acknowledging the land we call Canada as the traditional and ancestral territory of many Indigenous peoples. We respect the histories, languages, and cultures of First Nations, Métis, Inuit, and all First Peoples of Canada, whose presence continues to enrich our vibrant communities. The time since the last board meeting has been a busy one for the college. It was so great to attend IPIC's annual conference in Winnipeg, together with Judah Straczynski, CPATA CEO and Registrar, and Jen Slobodkin, our Director of Registration and Education and Deputy Registrar, and fellow board members Andrew Currier and Leonora Hoyka. It was a wonderful opportunity to connect with so many members of the professions and see the dedication of everyone to its continued success. I appreciated the opportunity that IPIC extended to Judah and me to meet in person with their new president, Paula Clancy, their vice president, Nathaniel Lipkus, and CEO, Adam Kingsley. We had a productive discussion and enhanced our mutual understanding of the roles of the two organizations and our goal to work together wherever possible and to respect where there may be differences. At the IPIC conference, Judah presented an update from the regulator and answered questions, and he'll be sharing some highlights from that event and the learnings later today. On note of conferences, Jen Slobodkin was a key presenter at the annual conference of the Canadian Network of Agencies for Regulation. Jen shared learnings from CPATA's experience building a new pan-Canadian federal and fully virtual regulator from the ground up. Jen was on a panel called Scaling Your Organization for Growth, an experiential discussion. She also presented the competence segment of the Fundamentals of Regulation workshop, and she hosted an interview with professional regulation researcher Susan Glover Takahashi on developing and maintaining competence, the interplay of individuals, organizations, and systems. We are incredibly fortunate to have Jen's expertise, and we so appreciate her generosity in sharing her insights with the regulatory community. Thanks so much, Jen. Before we open our agenda, let's take a moment to congratulate the Class 3 agents in training who wrote the qualifying exams this fall. This is such an important step in one's career, and we're so proud of those future agents. Congratulations to all of you. Today's agenda includes some presentations on the important work and priorities of our regulatory and governance committees. And that's in addition to the written reports in the board materials. The hard work, expertise, and guidance of CPATA's committees are essential in fulfilling our regulatory mandate. A huge thank you to all committee members. We'll also have a high-level presentation on CPATA's 2024 budget to provide an overview of our intended approach. As a reminder, CPATA's board meeting materials are published on the website, and they include the quarterly financial statements. The annual budget is published in the board materials prior to the December meeting, as that's when the budget is discussed and approved. And now, let's turn to today's agenda. The first item on the agenda is around conflict of interest. So board members have an opportunity to declare if they have any conflicts regarding materials in the agenda. I didn't receive any conflicts in advance of the meeting, but I'd like to quickly go around the table and ask if any board member has a conflict of interest. Okay, I am not seeing any, so we will move to the next section of our agenda, which is approval of the minutes. There is a motion. Be it resolved that the minutes of the September 22nd, 2023 board meeting are approved. Could I have someone make that motion, please? Leonora, I see your hand, and Elise as second. Thank you. That motion is on the table. I would like to open that for discussion. Any comments, concerns, questions, changes with the minutes? All right, I am seeing none, so I will call for a vote. All in favor? Great. Any opposed? And seeing no opposition, that motion is carried unanimously. Thank you. Next section is the committee report. So as I mentioned in my opening comments, each committee has provided a report within the board materials package. That package was made public in advance of the board meeting, so any members of the public joining us today will have had an opportunity to read the report, as well, of course, as all the board members who dove in and did all kinds of due diligence around reading those reports. I know that. So in addition to that, we're going to have some of our colleagues who are with us today provide a little bit of additional context, so some color commentary around those reports, which will be helpful not only for board members, but for members of the public who might be joining us today who would appreciate some extra context. The people that will be presenting the verbal reports are Victoria Reese, General Counsel and Professional Regulation, General Counsel Professional Regulation, Jennifer Slobodkin, our Deputy Registrar, Sean Walker, our CFO, Judah Straczynski, our CEO and Registrar, and Karima Bawa, our Chair of our Governance Committee. So Victoria, maybe I'll just lob the ball over to you and you can determine, is there a particular order that you think you'd like to share your updates with, and then you can pass the ball to your colleagues as you see fit. Over to you, Victoria.
Thanks, Ruth. I see Iris has a question. No? Okay, sorry. I'm actually getting over my second bout of COVID, so if I start coughing, you'll know why. I want to thank our chair and the CEO for agreeing to let me kind of mold things together. So rather than doing the committee reports and then the professional responsibility report, I'd like to tell a story of the life of a complaint as it goes through the system. And so I think it'll be easier to understand how our process works if I do that. And so you can stop me at any time or at the end as you prefer, because there's a lot of information here. But I think that the Professional Responsibility Program, or PR program at CPATA, really exemplifies the college's commitment to, as a modern regulator, to its public interest mandate, the regulatory objectives, and the principles of openness, fairness, accountability, and excellence in decision making. All decisions made throughout the process, whether by staff or by committees, are fully documented and clearly communicated with reasons to the parties affected by those decisions. So, in some jurisdictions, when a complaint got dismissed, you'd see a letter saying, "Thank you for your complaint, it's been dismissed, goodbye." That's not the way we operate. That's not going to help anybody. A key foundational principle is that whenever possible and appropriate, guidance is provided and decisions are made with a view to being restorative and educative rather than punitive. Early resolution of concerns is a key cornerstone of this process. You've heard me say before, some of you have heard me say this a few times, that the CPATA Act has its shortcomings in terms of permitting proactive and proportionate responses to conduct concerns. So for example, unlike most other professional regulators, our investigations committee only has authority to dismiss complaints, take urgent interim action, or refer matters to hearing. Typically, an investigations committee would be able to counsel, caution, reprimand, or take other action that it thinks is appropriate in the circumstances, rather than to refer a matter to hearing. We also lack the authority to have a fitness to practice stream, which would enable us to deal more humanely with concerns where a licensee may be suffering from an incapacity. So it's my hope that as CPATA evolves, we'll be able to bring those tools into our toolbox in due course. So it's within these confines that we've tried to carve out the best practices we can. And with the help of our excellent and highly qualified committee members, I think we've done a pretty good job so far. With over 2 years under our belt, our regulatory and policy framework is well developed, and we are in a continuous learning environment as we gain experience with patent and trademark issues on a really daily basis. So the professional responsibility program is comprised of ethics guidance and inquiries, the CPATA Code of Conduct for patent agents and trademark agents, agent conduct inquiries, complaints, the investigations committee, the discipline committee, and unauthorized practices concerns. So those all fall under the umbrella. So we start with ethics inquiries. This process for responding to inquiries from licensees about their ethical duties under the new 2021 CPATA Code of Conduct was the first component we created of the professional responsibility system, which demonstrated, and we hoped demonstrated to licensees, our commitment to be educative and to be proactive in avoiding complaints down the road. Some regulators don't really offer up that kind of advice, or say they do, and it's not very effective because they're afraid of incurring liability. But we believe that as long as we're very clear upfront, the limits of our guidance and advice, which in no way, waiver, represents legal or professional advice, such a service can only serve to help licensees better meet their obligations to clients. And I think that's what it's doing. And through these inquiries, we learn what ethical and practice issues licensees are grappling with, whether our code is sufficient for its purposes, and it allows us to close the circle of communications by preparing ethics articles for licensees in our newsletter based on the real life scenarios that licensees are facing. And I know from the feedback that Dana has received that those articles are very well received. So in 2022, we received 30 ethics inquiries, and to date in 2023, we've received about 17. We'll be looking at a program for licensees to learn more about their duties under the code in 2024. Now that we've had some experience, I think it's going to be really helpful to launch a very accessible program, a very interactive program to help licensees learn more about their duties under the code. So then the agent conduct inquiries process is the second stage in the PR process. This is an online means for members of the public, licensees, the government, and we've had all of those, to submit inquiries or concerns about a licensee's conduct without the need of filing a formal written complaint. I know from my experience that an average of 75% of complaints filed with professional regulators are usually dismissed or resolved at an early stage. But sometimes the process of dismissing a written complaint can take months, and it can be a lengthy and unsatisfactory process for everybody. So the ACI, or Agent Conduct Inquiry Early Resolution process, allows us to engage the parties in discussion of their concerns, find ways to resolve them quickly and informally where possible, and send the parties away with both of them having learned something. That's a real success in our view. And this process has been successful in diverting complaints away from a formal process that in many cases would have only heightened levels of frustration on both sides. In 2022, we responded to 12 agent conduct inquiries. To date this year, we've received about 15. Only 1 or 2 of these each year have resulted in going on to become a formal complaint. So I think that speaks to the level of success in early resolution. Excuse me. So because of the processes I just described, we have experienced a relatively low volume of formal complaints compared with other professional regulators of similar size. With the bylaw amendments in May this year, we took a large step forward, with the registrar now having the authority to resolve or dismiss complaints. So they don't have to go directly to the committee. Until this amendment, all complaints, regardless of whether they were within our jurisdiction or had merit, had to be referred to the investigations committee. And this was a cumbersome and disproportionate process. In 2022, we had just 3 complaints filed by clients, and the investigations committee initiated 3 complaints of its own based on information received through other sources. To date this year, 3 complaints have been filed by clients and 2 have been initiated by the investigations committee. So we're tracking about the same as last year. And of those 5 complaints, 3 related to the same licensee. So then we move to the investigations committee. The investigations committee's role under the Act is to evaluate whether a complaint establishes reasonable grounds for the committee to believe that a licensee has engaged in professional misconduct or is or was incompetent. And if the evidence that can reasonably be believed does establish these grounds, then the investigations committee must make an application to the discipline committee. Otherwise, they must dismiss, and in doing so, they can do it with or without advice on best practices to the licensee. In each case where an investigation has been ordered, the committee has retained an external professional. It's usually a lawyer. It could be, in some cases, a lawyer agent with relevant experience. The investigations committee does have authority to obtain production and other orders through the federal court, but that hasn't been necessary to date. Unfortunately, in many cases so far, the licensees under investigation have been failing to cooperate with the college and with the investigators. And in some cases, this has driven up costs and caused delays. This is a trend that I have observed since the start. This year, the committee will have met 4 times and made 2 new applications to the discipline committee, which are not yet public, with 1 other complaint that remains under investigation. They've also been working on 2 new policies that will come to the board in due course for information. They did decide recently that they will be asking the governance committee to appoint 2 new members to bring their number from 5 to 7 to help manage conflicts, workload, and for the purposes of succession plan. The authority of the discipline committee is laid out in detail in the Act, and that is helpful. They are required to hold an open oral hearing in respect of each application made by the investigations committee for purposes of determining whether a licensee engaged in professional misconduct or was incompetent. They must be able to conduct all proceedings in both official languages, and by default, all proceedings are conducted by audiovisual means and are concurrently or will be concurrently streamed on YouTube to permit easy access to the proceedings by any member of the public. This is important in terms of our commitment to transparency and accountability. So as the board is aware, the discipline committee is now comprised of 10 members, with 3 new members having been appointed in September and who participated in their first meeting last month. In addition to its proceedings, the discipline committee holds meetings of the committee as a whole committee for purposes of policy considerations, to engage in ongoing education, and to share experiences. And these are in-camera discussions that they have to just say whatever they want about what's going on and see if any new ideas for policies or procedures come up. This year, the discipline committee met in January and October, and they're planning to meet 3 times in 2024. There are currently 2 applications before the discipline committee that were in fact referred in 2022, about this time last year. And the Alpesh Patel proceedings are scheduled for November 27th, 28th, and 30th. And any of you are welcome to join by linking on to the YouTube site where they will be streamed. The Audet proceedings are at the pre-hearing conference stage. And as well, as I mentioned, the investigations committee referred 2 new matters to the discipline committee, and the notices of application I expect will be public prior to the new year. So the final area is unauthorized practice, and I know that this has been an area that's been one of interest and discussion amongst the licensees at CPATA, IPIC, and others. We have developed an internal process for responding to concerns with unauthorized practice. To date, nearly all these complaints have been filed by other licensees, not clients. We've adopted a measured, proportional, and risk-focused approach to these matters. Sometimes it appears on the surface that someone is engaged in unauthorized practice, but when we investigate further and look at their social media and websites, it's clear that the services they offer do not amount to the practice of an agent. Often our own licensees are not clear with what a non-licensee can do under the Patent Act or Trademark Act. And that's been the subject, even as of today, of some of our ethics inquiries. And so we're going to get together as staff and put together some clearer guidance on that in future. In other cases, our investigations have shown that an individual's marketing is in fact misleading. And we have communicated with these individuals about the limits of what they can and can't do under the legislation. Now, while I'm not aware this has happened, if someone were to persist with holding themselves out as a licensee when they're not, or to fail to correct their marketing in the ways that we've asked, then CPATA does have authority to seek injunctive relief through the federal court. When considering whether to undertake such intensive investigation or pursue costly steps for enforcement, we will look at such things as evidence of actual or potential harm to the public or the reputation of the profession, and a cost-benefit analysis. So in 2022, we received one unauthorized practice complaint, which resulted in a written warning. And to date in 2023, we've received about 8 such inquiries, some of which were filed anonymously, unhelpfully, but which we still looked into, and 2 of which will result in further inquiry. So that gives you a sense of the picture of professional responsibility from start to finish. I haven't talked much about the themes or trends or what we're seeing, but that has been the subject of previous reports to the board. So I'm happy to take any questions. Leonora?
Yeah, thank you very much for that excellent report, Victoria, as always. I just had a quick question on something you said towards the end about complaints regarding unauthorized practice, and you've had at least a couple of complaints that were anonymous. When someone makes a complaint, is that kept confidential? And, how long can that be kept confidential if something's pursued? I realize if we had to go to federal court on that, that might have to be revealed, but just can you give us a little more information about how you proceed in protecting the identity of complainants and in these situations?
So are you referring to complaints of unauthorized practice or complaints
Yes.
about licensees?
No, specifically about unauthorized practice.
Okay, so we don't have the same duty of confidentiality with regard to concerns of an unauthorized practice as we do in relation to the complaints against licensee process, because these are complaints against non-licensees, those who are not licensed. And so generally though, unless, as you said, unless we have to go to the federal court for injunctive relief, my investigation usually involves reviewing social media, reviewing LinkedIn, reviewing websites, and then communicating directly with the individual who may be at issue. If I need to, and I haven't had to yet, maybe once, go back to the complaint and then ask for more information. But it's not something that would become public. But there wouldn't be a reason why not in terms of who we are investigating, because we have no duty of confidentiality to non-licensees. Do you know what I mean? And so if, for example, we had a concern and had good evidence that somebody was ignoring us, was continuing to misrepresent themselves and that sort of thing, there may be no reason why we wouldn't actually post that on our website as a warning to the public and to licensees if that was necessary. So that's one of the things we could consider but haven't done yet.
But the complainant themselves, I'm thinking that they might have a concern about retaliation, or that may be why these complaints have been anonymous.
Yes, that's a possibility. And as I say, we would never reveal the source, and it's not necessary often. Almost always it's not necessary to reveal them, because what they're complaining about is available to the public. It's either how somebody's marketing themselves. It's almost always how somebody's marketing themselves and what they're actually doing. If it was a client, a harmed client, we would absolutely take steps to protect them. But there's just no need to actually reveal our source of information to a non-licensee. We just say, here is what I'm seeing. So your website says this, your LinkedIn page says this, just so you know, that's contrary to this. You need to stop.
Thank you for the clarification.
Thanks very much, Victoria. Would you Anybody else have any questions for Victoria? Otherwise, we will move on perhaps to Jen or Victoria. What do you think is the next sort of lineup within this section of committee and program reports?
It looks like it's Jen.
Over to you, Jen.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ruth. It's nice to see everybody again. So I'm just going to give you a very brief overview of the work of the registration committee. And then later on, when we're doing the program reports, I'll provide a more detailed report of what's happening in the competency initiative area. So the role of the registration committee is to assist the registrar in administering the college's licensing requirements. The committee approves standards for the evaluation of competencies and pass marks for the qualifying exams. And when requested by an applicant or a licensee, they review decisions made by the registrar under the bylaws. The committee last met on July 28th to consider 2 requests for review of a registrar's decision. To date, the committee has reviewed 8 registrar's decisions, 7 of which were related to the qualifying examinations, and 1 of which was related to the requirement to complete 24 months of supervised training to establish eligibility for the exams. With respect to the competency initiative, the committee approved the technical competency profiles in December of 2022, the test specifications in March of 2023, and the standard setting approaches to be used for the qualifying examinations in June of 2023. This coming December, the committee will be meeting to review the Fair Registration Practices Audit Report. We have discussed the importance of harnessing the spirit of fair registration principles in our registration policies and procedures. The pillars of fair registration practices are fairness, transparency, impartiality, and objectivity. The committee intends to provide the results of the audit and a summary of their recommendations to the board in 2024. A panel of the committee will be meeting in December to conduct 2 written registration hearings. And in 2024, the committee will be approving the pass marks for the qualifying exams based on the selected standard setting approaches and approving the professional foundation's competency profile as part of their next phase of the competency initiative. I'm happy to take any questions about the registration committee's work.
I'm not seeing any questions, Jen. I'm wondering, did you want to go on to the competency report, or should we finish the, or do you want to
sure.
just finish, your section? Does that make sense?
Perfect. Yep, I'm
If
happy to
that
proceed.
flows, then let's do it. Perfect.
Awesome.
thank you.
Okay, sounds good. All
Okay.
right, so now I'm going to talk about a few different things. I'll give an overview of the 2023 qualifying exam administration, and I'll also provide some updates on the competency initiative. So 2023 is the last year of administering the legacy qualifying exams. The 2023 trademark qualifying exam was administered on September 19th and 20th. 57 candidates wrote Part A and 53 candidates wrote Part B. Marking is currently underway and the results are on schedule to be released on December 1st. The 2024 patent agent qualifying examination was administered between October 23rd and 27th. 70 candidates wrote paper A, 68 wrote paper B, 28 wrote paper C, and 71 wrote paper D. Marking is also currently underway and the results are on schedule to be released the first week of January. As a reminder, candidates who are successful on the 2023 exams are eligible to apply for Class 1 licensure, and candidates who are unsuccessful on the 2023 exams will be transitioned into the new exam process, starting with the knowledge exams in March of 2024. Now I'll give a brief overview of the technical competency profile and professional foundations work. For many years, there were no clearly defined overview of what agents must be able to do. Similarly, the way to become an agent, i.e. the completion of a 24-month training period and passing of the qualifying exams, and the nature of the qualifying exams themselves have remained unchanged for a long period of time. CPATA's vision is to provide the public with access to a globally respected body of patent agents and trademark agents who are highly skilled, ethical, and current in their knowledge. As a new regulator, CPATA is reviewing agent competencies and entry to practice requirements to establish what improvements may build on the current system. We started this process in 2021, and the work is ongoing. The first step was to set clear standards for the technical competencies and professional skills that patent agents and trademark agents must acquire to serve their clients in the form of technical competency profiles for patent agents and trademark agents. The legacy qualifying examinations were reverse engineered to identify important knowledge concepts and competencies that were already being evaluated. With that foundation, we worked with dozens of agents using a rigorous development, translation, and validation process to create the technical competency profiles. In December of 2022, the registration committee approved those profiles and the board adopted them at their March 2023 meeting. The development of the professional foundations profile will begin in 2024 to define the professional skills that must complement an agent's technical knowledge to run a successful practice and practice successfully as an agent. In 2024, CPATA will be seeking participation from agents to create the profile and will conduct a survey of the entire profession to validate it prior to its adoption. The knowledge examinations are going to be part of the new qualifying examination, so I'll speak a little bit about the work that's been done on the knowledge exams. They're a computer-based multiple choice exam that's being developed to assess the basic technical knowledge competencies identified in the competency profiles. Throughout 2023, we worked with 15 patent agents and 15 trademark agents who were recruited to develop and review the 2024 item bank. 4 bilingual patent agents and 4 bilingual trademark agents were also recruited to conduct the review of the translated items. Each group was selected to represent a diverse cross-section of the profession, including language, gender, practice location, practice environment, practice area, and academic background. Item developers developed questions based on the test specifications and used an item development style guide and item development checklist and received a 3-hour item development training session conducted by our psychometric consultant to ensure consistency and standardization. The items also went through a rigorous several stage review process, which included a psychometric review, a peer review, and a super review. The translated items were reviewed by the bilingual agent groups, as I mentioned, and the bilingual reviewers were asked to confirm that the items that have been suitably adapted to the cultural environment and that the item format and task would be equally familiar to candidates of both the English and French populations. Specifically, they were asked to confirm that each item in both languages had the same meaning, used language to comparable difficulty and level of abstraction, used the same format, used equivalent emphasis, had the same correct answer, and were about the same length. We also asked them to watch for changes that were introduced by translation that might influence an item's difficulty, introduce a cue, or alter the structure of an item in a way that affected the item's complexity. The knowledge exam forms are being piloted next week on November 13th, and the forms will be approved by a subset of the Skills Exam Advisory Group before the end of 2023. Sample knowledge exams consisting of 15 independent multiple choice questions were selected from the item bank and represent a sample of the content and cognitive level requirements that are set out in the test specifications. These samples are in the process of being published on our website and communicated in the November newsletter. Now I'll provide a brief update on the skills examination work. Candidates must pass the knowledge exams to establish eligibility for the skills exams, which are again computer-based and will be used to assess patent agent-related and trademark agent-related skills-based technical competencies. The guides for each skills examination component have been developed using psychometric consulting expertise and subject matter expertise that included support provided by patent agents and trademark agents who were familiar with the competency profiles, the test specifications, and the legacy exam development. The guides align to the test specifications and related exam targets. The skills exam advisory groups, who will be developing and marking the skills exams, will be selected to again represent a diverse cross-section of the profession. These groups will receive general training to highlight best practices in writing, such as using plain language and avoiding ambiguity, navigating cognitive levels, assessing difficulty, adhering to brand standards, and mitigating bias. Sample exams using content from prior years are currently being developed using those guides. These samples will be published in early 2024 to assist trainees in understanding the expectations for this component of the licensure process. Now, we couldn't do any of the work that I just described without the participation and support of patent agents and trademark agents. Dozens of agents have participated in various components of the competency initiative and examinations to date, and we cannot express enough gratitude for their time and subject matter expertise. To assist us with the next phase of work, we're currently recruiting another dozen or more dozens of agents to assist with developing the 2025 knowledge exams, participate in standard setting for the 2024 knowledge exams, and participate on the skills exam advisory group. In the future, CPATA wants to examine the merits and challenges of the current 24-month training period requirement and the qualifying examinations to see if there are any improvements that can be made to the system for potential licensees and their supervisors, and to consider whether additional pathways to licensure might benefit the IP ecosystem. I'm happy to take questions on the competency initiative update.
That was fantastic, Jen. Thank you so much. I don't see any questions, but really, really appreciate the extra color and context that you provided. That was fantastic.
Thank you.
The next report is the Audit and Risk Committee report. And we've got Sean and Judah up to present any additional colored commentary you'd like on that report. Please go ahead.
Thank you. I'm going to invite my colleague Sean to start us off. Sean? Sean, I'm sorry, you're on mute, I believe.
How's that? Is that any better? Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay, so the Audit and Risk Committee meets 4 or 5 times a year, and made up of a number of members on the board here with us and chaired by Bob Plamondon. In each meeting, we have like a foundational group of activities, which include reviewing the minutes, of course, and action log from the previous meeting. We review the internal financial statements that I prepare, that me and my team prepare on a monthly basis. And we also review the legislative compliance memo, and that relates to various financial and operational requirements that CPATA has to follow. And then at each meeting, we also throw in 2 or 3 additional matters that the committee deals with throughout the year. And then since the last meeting where the report came to the board, the Audit and Risk Committee met in both September and October, with September really being focused on a couple of policies that came to the board in late September. So we had the financial reserve policy, which leads into the budget discussion, which we will have soon. And also we talked about and brought a draft investment policy based on the recommendations from the Audit Risk Committee. Both of those policies were approved by the board in September and are now in circulation. Also in the September meeting, we did have a general discussion about the budget assumptions and the planning that would go into the next couple of meetings and into the work that we're going to discuss today. And we also spent some time this summer looking at the risk register and heat map. So we did a refresher of that in September just to do a check-in to see what had changed. The October meeting was a little more heavy lifting. We did the normal foundational review of the financial statements, but we also then took a look at the first draft of the budget documents that have been prepared and will be discussed today. And we also talked about the external auditors. So we had Grant Thornton for the last couple of years, and you'll see in a separate memo that's come to the board today for recommendation for them as well. So our meetings tend to be around the two-hour mark, usually we usually have 1 or 2 per quarter, and always usually with a little more weight in the spring when we go through the year-end audit, and then in the fall and into the winter when we look at the budget. And that is the quick update from the A&R committee. Oh, and questions, of course. Leonora.
Hi, Sean. Thank you very much for that report. I just had a couple of questions about the risk register and heat map. Now, that's a document that comes to the board periodically, and it helps to inform the board about, risks and, relative risks and what's getting better and what has suddenly popped up as potentially a new risk to the organization and inform staff as well. I think, how frequently does the Audit and Risk Committee review that?
So we do a very detailed review in the summer. We plan a longer working meeting where we go through probably the top 20 items on it. And then we do a quick, less fulsome review at one of the other meetings during the year, usually in the fall or in January. And then it's brought to the committee at least every second meeting, just with any updates that Jude and myself and the rest of the staff make to the two documents. So it's looked at least once a quarter by the committee.
Thank you.
Okay.
That's great. Thanks for the question, Leonora. Any other questions for Sean before we move into the governance committee report? Looks like that's it. Sean, thank you so much for that presentation. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Karima, over to you, Karima, as chair of the governance committee.
Hi, we met in October. We had the good fortune of having Leonora join Amber and myself and Peter Cowan, who's a fellow board member. And we had the good fortune of having Victoria actually walk us through our CPATA board policies and procedures, which we started discussing months ago, as you might recall, just to try and streamline those policies and procedures and maybe make them a little more robust. Our board meeting really focused on those. Victoria had prepared a memo for us and had drafts for us, but we weren't quite there yet. So we're not quite ready to present those to the board for their review, but we're very, very close. And I think it will be a far more easily navigatable document for board members and actually for people to review in terms of what our practices and procedures are for the board. We also had a bit of a discussion around continued education for the board and for the staff, and a CEO evaluation process, which Judah has volunteered to do first cut at for review by the governance committee. I don't know, Victoria, if you have anything you'd like to add in terms of the policies and procedures, but I think it's shaped up very nicely. And really had a lot of engagement from everybody on that committee. So any questions? I think that's it for my report.
Thank you very much, Karima, and thanks to the governance committee for the heavy lifting. It's important. Governance is such a foundation of any good board and good organization. So thank you so much. Then next up, we have a stakeholder engagement report section where Judah is going to talk to us a little bit about the experience at the IPIC annual conference, and then Jen's going to talk to us a bit about the CNAR conference. So over to you, Judah. Oh, Leonora, you've got a question?
Didn't you skip over number 6, which is Victoria's report on professional responsibility program?
No, Victoria included that report. That was included in Victoria's
presentation. My apologies.
No worries. Yeah, no worries. Okay. All right.
Well,
over to you, Judah.
Thank you. As you all know, for CPATA to succeed, we need to continuously work with our stakeholders and to work as effectively as possible with our licensees, with Canadians, innovators generally, and with government, and also be able to work effectively with other regulators, given dual regulation for some of our licensed professionals, but also to learn about best trends and to be able to make sure that we are continuing to follow best-in-class regulatory policy. And today we're focusing on 2 of those pieces. So the first is around engagement with IPIC and with many of our licensees in Winnipeg at IPIC's very successful annual conference. I was thrilled to be joined by directors and by Jen at this conference. It was a great opportunity to see the diversity within both our patent agent profession and the trademark agent profession. It was really inspiring to see the depth of knowledge and the passion of IPIC volunteers who continue to develop excellent programming for their members. It was a wonderful time to a dialogue with IPIC leadership, as Ruth alluded to earlier, and to share updates from the regulator. And there were a lot of great discussions in the hallways, at meal times. And so I was able to hear from, for example, newly minted patent agents who said, we need continuing education. We need that to become a core part of our professional identity, that's a mandatory thing that we will embrace to maintain our skills as we continue out there. We talked with people about inclusion in the profession and the different workplaces that we find our agents. So there was just so many moments like that that we were able to take away from the session. For our part, the key message that I think was well received is that we really are going to need the profession in order to do this important work that's coming up. And we have always looked to the profession, with one exception. We have looked to the profession for help all the way through, from setting up our rules of conduct, setting a right touch approach to professional liability insurance, setting up our committees and appointments, setting up volunteers for our exams, for setting our exams, setting our competency profiles. We have always relied on the input of the profession, and that will continue in earnest. And there are going to be lots of calls for individuals to get involved, and there will be opportunities for associations such as IPIC to share feedback with us that we'll be able to consider. I did discuss in detail the exceptional circumstances that led to our bylaws needing to go through to Gazette publication without consultation, but explained the background and the need for us to maintain financial stability and to be able to continue to build to meet our diverse regulatory requirements. And that was generally well understood and received. I think it helped for people to hear that this is not how we normally want to be doing business, that we normally are going to have longer runways before we engage on key issues. And so that was well received. We did hear that there were some areas where while our budget is transparent and while we publish our financial statements, there were some who were asking for some further clarification around particular areas of where we disclose our financial information. And as we'll see later today, one of the things we are working towards is making sure that there's some greater clarity as to the costs associated with different committee work. Some of it is effectively regulatory work, while some of it is effectively governance work. And we're trying to separate that out a bit further so that there's greater clarity of those costs for those who are interested. We're also going to be including our fractional consultants who we are treating, I won't say as employees because they are contractors, but who are dedicating a significant amount of time in part-time roles on behalf of CPATA within our staff line item, so that people can understand greater where our staffing costs are, because staffing is typically a significant line item for a regulator. And while that was low so far, there were questions about why consultants are costing so much. And so we just want people to understand that some of those consultants are effectively part of our operational work day to day. And on the other consultants, we'll be able to break down more about what those costs are. That will help the public see that our single greatest consultant cost outside of those who are effectively like staff to us are external legal counsel and experts. And that includes IP agents, it includes lawyers, and that is normally predominantly related to our investigations and discipline work. So those are core regulatory pieces where it is more effective to obtain the skills as needed on a case-by-case basis than to hire full-time investigators or hire additional full-time counsel onto our payroll, where we are still developing a sense of the volume of complaints that we may receive, and where we are going to need, as any regulator would, particular experts as consultants to defend us in matters, to advance prosecutions on our behalf, potentially take matters to federal court, or simply to provide us with highly expert opinions, legal opinions on standards of care or other issues that regulators frequently require. And so it's a good learning exercise, a good learning opportunity, and we're hearing and we're adjusting as we go. I'm going to give Jen the rest of the time we have to this session, though. I was so delighted to watch Jen in action here. It was a pre-record video for CNAR, but there were several hundred people in attendance to watch it, and several hundred people of it watching online at CNAR this year, where Jen was really able to share our learnings, and many other regulators across Canada took note and have been in touch with us around some of the pieces we were able to do. There were certainly some significant advantages to being able to build from zero and to build a digital first, remote first, pan-Canadian regulator, and others are taking note. CNAR is going to have its conference again next year in Ottawa, the nation's capital, and we're hopeful that we'll be able to be actively engaged at that conference as well. But Jen, why don't you share a little bit of a high level about some of the key messages that you delivered, because to the extent that this board hasn't heard those remarks and we're not able to be there at the conference, I think it would be beneficial for them and attendees today and online in the future to get a sense of some of the key messages you shared. Jen?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Judah. It was a pleasure to attend the IPIC conference and speak to many agents. And it was also a pleasure to participate and attend at the 2023 CNAR conference in Vancouver. As Judah mentioned, this is an important opportunity for CPATA to share its experience and learnings in building a modern regulator and to exchange with the regulatory community. And as Ruth explained at the beginning of the meeting, I moderated and facilitated the Fundamentals of Regulation pre-conference workshop, which covered the regulator's mandate, regulatory governance, quality practice, professional conduct, and the regulator's voice. And I presented the segment on quality practice. Now, this program was developed for staff and board members who are new to professional regulation, and I provided a deeper dive into how regulators promote quality practice with standards for competency at entry and throughout professional practice. During the conference itself, I did present a session on a panel about scaling your organization for growth, and I'll share a couple of the key messages that I shared with that group during that presentation. So I talked about the need for growing organizations to be creative, strategic, and flexible when it comes to identifying HR needs and bridging gaps as volume grows. Having flexibility to ramp up work as needed is important for us to build and grow and keep the lights on at the same time. I explained that building a regulator from scratch and being part of its early growth required diverse experiences and a wide range of relevant and complementary knowledge and skills. The input and feedback from a lot of different perspectives is what has allowed us to build and implement our frameworks, our systems, and our policies as efficiently and effectively as possible in such a short period of time. I shared that we didn't have a culture at the beginning because we didn't have anything at the beginning. As each role was filled and the team grew, each of us knew how important it was to set the right tone from the beginning, and we intentionally did that. We recognize that diversity is paramount to foster creativity, innovation, problem solving, and better decision making, and that embracing diversity of lived and professional experiences has made us a learning organization where we share stories, challenges, and achievements, both personal and professional, which encourages everyone to learn from each other's successes and failures. And even though we bring our own unique experiences to the table, we hold a holistic perspective. We all have a sense of individual responsibility and accountability, coupled with a deep understanding of how each of our roles contributes to the good of the organization and our public protection mandate. How we achieve our mandate comes from inspired leadership, From the start, we had a great sense of importance and responsibility instilled in the work that we're doing on both a micro and a macro level. At the micro level, we are creating stability, consistency, and accountability for agents and their clients. At the macro level, we are contributing to Canada's innovation strategy, being part of a framework that was created to help protect Canadian intellectual property. I shared that respect, kindness, collaboration, honesty, and humor have been our keys to encouraging and embedding safety and creating a positive and productive environment. I spoke about how organizational structure and capacity are interdependent and mutually reinforcing factors that shape the identity and performance of an organization, and that as regulators scale for growth, they need to be thinking about how capacity influences the design and effectiveness of the structure. A well-aligned structure and capacity can help the organization achieve its mandate. We have created and been able to maintain a relatively flat organizational structure where there are fewer layers of management and more direct communication between leadership and staff. And this has been possible because we encourage and foster a strong capacity for leadership performance, which is motivational and allows us to be efficient and responsive. I also shared insights into budgeting, sustainability, technology, and collaboration. And I was able to attend lots of sessions. So even though I was presenting a lot of sessions, I attended a lot of sessions as well. And those focused on quality assurance and risk-based regulation, trauma-informed professional regulation, the relationship between professional regulation and psychometrics, and recent cases in regulatory law. So it was a fantastic conference and a great experience, and I'm happy to have shared those messages with the regulatory community and with you.
That's so
Any
awesome.
questions?
You're just so awesome, Jen. Truly, we're so lucky to have you, honestly. Any questions for Jen before we move into the exciting next section about appointing our external auditors? This is your chance to talk to Jen or talk about auditors. Okay, that's great. Jen, thank you so much. Elise, it looks like you have a question for Jen.
Yeah, actually a comment. I would like to congratulate you and demonstrate to you that, the board and me as a member of the board, the appreciation we have for the high quality of the professionalism and work, and most importantly for your dedication of you and the staff, and Judah obviously included. But, it's coming out as best in class. And the humility behind that is also extraordinarily inspiring. One step at a time, we will get there. So we are with you, Jen.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
So very well said, Elise. Thank you so much for that. All right, thanks very much, Jen. Next section on our agenda is the annual appointment of our auditors. So I'm going to start by asking for a motion to be placed on the table, and then we will discuss that motion. So the motion, be it resolved, the board appoints Grant Thornton LLP as external auditor for CPATA's 2023 year-end audit. Could I have someone move that, please? I see Iris, and then I see Tom as second. Thank you so much. So that motion is now on the table. I'd like to open it up for discussion. And so Sean or Judah, if you'd like to provide any additional color commentary over and above what you've already provided to the board in the materials, feel free. Sean, anything you want to add before we?
Just a quick, I guess, update via background. Just that the Grant Thornton team in Halifax here has been with us since inception, since CPATA went live back in June of 2021. They're the only auditors, they're the only auditors we've known from an organizational lens, and they've been really, really good to work with, and they've been able to meet the really tight timelines over the last, well, since they came in the last couple of years, meaning that we have our timeline to get our audited financial statements signed off, and then the annual report and the additional reporting that goes with that has to be to the minister's office by the end of March. And for an audit with a December 31st year end, that's a really quick turnaround. So I've personally been really happy with their service, and we talked through that with the Audit and Risk Committee, and now we're bringing this motion forward again to appoint them for this upcoming year end at the end of December.
Thanks so much, Sean. That's great. That's great additional context. So the motion is on the floor. Are there any questions or further discussion? Okay, seeing none, I'll call for a vote on that motion. All in favor? Thanks so much. Any opposed? Seeing none, that motion is carried. Thanks, everyone. The next item on our agenda is going to be, it's yours as well, Sean, and that is a preliminary discussion of the budgeting sort of highlights and approach for 2024. And then the September 30th financial statements and highlights, and the legislative compliance memo. Those are all within this same section. So over to you, Sean, to provide any color commentary or context that you'd like to for discussion in this section.
Okay.
Maybe before we get started, because Sean's going to have some slides that he's going to lead us through to help guide the discussion. And for those who are watching, we are going to make these available online after the meeting, but they were sort of a work in progress, and so they'll be available to see and to guide things. But before we get into the finance, I can just talk briefly about the legislative compliance memo. You'll see that we are in compliance with all the key areas that the checklist provides for, so there should not be any concerns there. There is one hiccup, though, which is with respect to our Official Language Act compliance. As you will see, we were subject to a complaint, and frankly, with good reason, at the early start of the college. We weren't sure how to, as an independent regulator, meet the Official Language Act requirements. We sought input from the Official Languages Commissioner and received it. There has been follow-up work that we have been doing diligently to make sure that we are meeting the Official Language Act requirements. We've done all sorts of due diligence to see where there may be opportunities to enhance the service. We continue to have active offer as our leading principle as we work in both official languages and make it clear to the public that we're able to serve in both languages, be that a licensee requiring assistance or a complainant or just a member of the public with the question. There were some follow-ups from the Office of the Official Languages, and without much of a pun intended here, there was a little bit lost in translation. And so now that we know what it is that they are looking from us to include in our reporting, we are updating our reporting, and we have done so. We believe we're compliant. We believe we'll have an updated report from the OLA's commissioner to advise that we are compliant, but we are waiting on that. And if there is further work that they identify that we need to be done, we will take care of it. But one issue, for example, was that they were looking for evidence of training. And I provided back that we have sent our two staff who do not speak French fluently onto language training, but the rest of the organization speaks French fluently. And they said that that's wonderful, truly, but what we were looking for was the training plan for Official Languages Act. So we've shared with them what that training plan was, and that was just a simple misunderstanding on my part. So I take full responsibility for that and have engaged with them to try to clarify. And so that's the one hiccup you will notice in the compliance memo, but I believe we're on the right path, and none of the reporting has at all impacted our continued effort to make sure that all services are available in English and French, and none of these changes in the reporting requirements will impact that ongoing commitment that has been in place for quite some time now. And so that is just for the board's comfort at this point.
Thanks very much, Judah. That's really helpful. Okay, Sean, over to you.
Okay. So just for logistics, is it easiest for me to share my screen to walk through the PowerPoint? Okay, perfect. Okay. All right. Hopefully you can all see the PowerPoint. Please let me know if anything is, say if you can't tell if anything's missing because it's either all or nothing. Okay. So we're going to walk through at a very high level the draft budget assumptions that we've come up with so far. And this is based on the work that we did back in the summer with the staff, and then brought this along with some detailed planning documents to the Audit and Risk Committee here back at the end of October. Okay, so if there's any questions, by all means, please stop me during the way, and either myself or Judah can chime in. But we want to make this as meaningful and as interactive as possible. So please let us know. Okay, so very similar to last year, we really kind of have a 5-step budget planning focus. So usually in August, September to October, I start to gather a lot of the forecast data, the inflationary data, work with the other members on the CPATA team to look at what programs might be coming new or ending, or changes that might be required for the next year. And then we kind of take last year's budget and start to massage it with the changes that we see that are going to happen or predict that will happen. Then in the second box, this goes to the Audit and Risk Committee in October for a first overview, first go around. And just like last year, there was some suggestions made on things that we should tweak or change, or even change the presentation on. So that happened there at the end of October. And then the middle box is today. So this is where we go through the first iteration of the budget for next year. And then from this meeting, we will take any suggestions or adjustments that this group comes up with, include those in any other adjustments that may have popped up since the Audit and Risk Committee met a couple of weeks ago. And then for the end of November, we'll go back with our second version of the budget with a recommendation to bring that back to the board at the meeting set for December 14th, where we go through it with the board in greater detail. And then all things being equal, there'll be a vote and a recommendation to approve for 2024. Next year, we're planning to start having multi-year budgets. So this process might look a little different, where we'll have probably more future columns built into the budget and what things might look like. But for this year, we're still in the 1-year planning cycle. Okay. So some overarching, like high-level notes around the budget and what we're trying to achieve. So the first note is that the budget that we're presenting today has a contribution to our financial reserves. So that means that once we take the revenues or income less off the expenses, we're left with between $350,000 to $400,000 of funds that we're hoping will be able to be contributed towards the 2 reserves that we're going to talk about in a minute. We again have a $100,000 contingency built in for expenses, but new this year for 2024, we've added an additional contingency of $100,000 in the revenue or income section of the budget. And then I'll explain a bit about that as well, but that is a new addition for this year. And then one big thing that we'll talk about as well is back in April, the bylaws were changed, which allowed for the increase of the Class 1 practicing fee up from $1,000 currently up to $1,800. And then there's also an increase for licenses for agents who hold dual licenses as well. And that goes up from still a 50% reduction on the second license, but that goes up from $500 up to $900 for 2024. And then for next year, we're not anticipating growth. We're kind of assuming a small reduction in the size of the profession, probably for the next year, while Class 3 agents are still training and coming into the fold. Okay. So really the fiscal reality. So these are kind of even more higher level overarching items that we're talking about. So we've conservatively budgeted for like a short-term reduction in our class 1 or practicing agents. We've built the figures with a 10 to 15% reduction, with some of that reduction being transfers to non-practicing statuses, and some we think might result in resignations or retirements of agents over the next year. Okay.
And let me just jump in here that this is conservative in terms of how we have budgeted. And this is for budget purposes. This isn't us saying that we expect that this will occur. This is us looking at the current membership, recognizing that we know that those who do this core exclusive work are here for the long term, and that where this work is a core part of somebody's professional services, they tend to remain and have already remained despite increased costs to require mandatory and professional liability insurance. For some, this was a very new cost, or other costs of being subject to professional regulation. And so we have done that risk mapping exercise where we have talked with those in the profession. We have engaged in looking at how other regulators have typically seen a decrease at the outset of the introduction of professional regulation requirements such as insurance or increased fees, and how this is a normal expected path as a formal modern regulatory structure is created for a profession, but what we typically see is growth thereafter. And so that is the trajectory, and these are conservative estimates, given that we have to live within our means. And so we are being very cautious here, but it is not intended to be taken as our expected reduction or the probable reduction. We are just trying to conservatively budget. Sean?
Yep, exactly. Thanks, Judah. The next point here is we'll talk more and more over the next month or two about the fee increase and where the funds will go. But you'll see that the fee increase was really necessary for CPATA to be able to not just sustain our operations, but also to cover the true cost of regulation and also build those reserves that we talked about, which are so important, not just as a rainy day fund, but to cover extraordinary costs that regulators can face on an annual basis. I know Victoria and I have seen from our past together where 1 year can wipe out a big reserve balance. So it's really key to have those set aside just to ensure the longevity of the organization and the regulator. Okay, and as Judah mentioned, this year we did see about a 5% reduction in Class 1 agents. So that's why we're, again, as saying, being very conservative with our membership numbers, or not membership, with the agent numbers for next year. Okay, so I mentioned the financial reserves, and if you remember back at the September meeting, we talked about we approved the financial reserves policy, which targets the setup of a professional regulation reserve, and we've targeted that at $750,000, and also an operational reserve fund based on 6 months of operating expenses. So you see the operating fund is just over 1.4 million, which represents like a half a year of operating expenses. And together with the professional regulation reserve, it's just under 2.2 million. It is very important to note that even if the budget as we've laid it out and we get somewhere between the $350,000 to $400,000 contribution to the reserves from the surplus in 2024, that still gets us to only $686,000 in reserve, which is still about 1.5 million lower than our initial targets of the 2.2. So if just thinking forward, if we're looking at 400,000 per year, that's going to take probably another 3 to 4 years to fully develop those budgets or develop the reserves on a straight line basis. Okay. So in the budget for the revenue and income side, as I've mentioned, the class 1 fee is increasing to 1,800 with dual agents up to 2,700. And we've also introduced a class 2 license. Previously, class 2 was non-active or non-practicing. We've changed that to class 4 and instituted this new class 2, which is practicing agents who are not required to present to CPO. So it's a slightly reduced fee for agents that are doing that final or a part of that work that goes that includes present to CPO. As Jen mentioned earlier in the meeting, 2024 is going to see the introduction of a second set of exams. So the new knowledge exams in the spring will be in addition to the skills exams in the fall. You'll see as we go through this that, of course, having a second set of exams comes with increased costs to administer and run those exams, but also a little bit of increased revenue to try to offset some of those costs. And I'll show you later on. Unfortunately, the costs for next year are outweighing the additional revenue, so that is definitely not a moneymaker. It's more of a cost recovery type model. Okay. New for the budget for 2024, we're going to budget some interest income. So this year, with the passing of the investment policy, we now are taking any surplus cash that we have on hand from the early in the year fee receipts and investing that in some very conservative short-term GICs. For 2023, we were able to get a GIC with just under 5%, which is very high. So we've budgeted around 25,000. Conservatively about 25,000 for next year. The intention being that once we start collecting fees in February and March, as soon as fee season's over, we would then bump up the GIC in order to try to maximize the interest that we can receive. And then I mentioned the new additional $100,000 contingency in the income section, really just because we don't know what we don't know around next year's numbers, so we've added that in there as a bit of a cushion. Okay. And now the Pac-Man diagram. So this is a visualization of the different areas of income or revenue, and you'll see because CPATA's colors are white, I didn't make this a big yellow Pac-Man. Or sorry, red is the main color, so it's not a big yellow Pac-Man, but you'll see that our class 1 fees make up about 86% of revenue. And then when you add in the class 2, 3, and 4, it's actually up over 90%, and then followed by exam fees at just over 200,000 for 6%. And then we have some application fees and the interest fees or interest income that I talked about as well. Okay. In the expense side of the house, few changes from this year moving into next year. So the plan is, or discussions around having changing up the board meeting schedule to have more in-person but longer meetings, and that will result in more travel costs but fewer actual meeting costs. So that's the plan for next year. Discipline and hearing, as Victoria mentioned earlier, we've seen a large increase in the number of investigations and work that we're doing in that area. So we've budgeted an increase for discipline and hearing matters, for legal fees to relate to those hearings or investigations, but also for costs that would accompany that as well, be it translation costs or court costs or interpreter and documentation type areas. Registration, so that's the exam and competency programs. We've talked about obviously the increase in the number of exams, so the expenses have gone up to run those exams, and then also building continual into 2025 and moving forward. Salaries and benefits, Judah and I have been working with our HR consultant to look at salaries for next year and where the market is going and where our staff should be paid. So we've added that. We've added some increases in there as well, and also potential for adding a portion or another staff member to help with registration and some other areas as well as what has been built in there. Translation cost, we're seeing an increase in the volume of translation and live interpretation that we're doing. A lot of our materials, again, are being translated into both French and English, both official languages. And with the increase in with Victoria's work on the discipline side and with Jen's work on the registration side, a lot of these materials now have to be translated to both languages as well. So we're seeing an increase there. And then for the communications and stakeholder relations group, there's a plan to do more outreach and have potentially set up some advisory working groups in 2024 so that we can hear more directly from the profession and work with them more closely. And then the contingency again is 100,000 has been budgeted for 2024 on the expense side. So that's similar to the last couple of years. Okay. And then another chart similar to the revenue pie chart. This one's a little more spread out. You'll see, but salaries, benefits, and outsourced supports, that's all like staff and people related, just about 40%. And then the next two large buckets are, again, the discipline and hearing cost and the registration area with the exam and the competency. And then we'd also have another big chunk is, of course, our board and regulatory committees. So as we've mentioned, the committees that presented earlier, along with this group, there's costs to administer board meetings and honor and remuneration paid for time spent. Okay.
I just say as well that it's interesting that already you can see much of the pie chart is really spent at doing the work on the program and regulatory needs. We often see regulators where the salaries, which of course are in support of all that work, typically are around 50% of budget. And so we've managed to keep the salary piece a bit leaner for the time being, even within a smaller budget. And you can see that there's lots being done to advance.
Okay, thanks, Judah. Okay, so that's the budget side. And then this is a very high level overview of the budget for 2023 and then the comparison for 2024. You'll see some of the big areas that are changing, I'll highlight. So license fees, you'll see you're going from 2.1 million up to 3.2. It's about a 50% increase. That again is due to the change in the rates that were in the bylaws. The exam fees are going up about 25% compared to budget for this year. The forecast for this year is actually a lot lower than the 150. So when looking at the 200 for next year, we were looking at actual, as Jen said, or the writers this fall. We've looked at the anticipated number of writers in the spring and then those that would carry forward to the fall as well. The interest income that I mentioned before, and then there's the contingency as well. Okay. And then some of the bigger changes down in the expense areas I've already talked about, like the salaries and outsourced support, discipline and hearing, regulatory programs. You see that the cost has gone up from 290 up to 475, but our exam fees have only gone from 150 to 200. So the increase on the cost side is much larger than the revenue side. Administration and office. So that includes things like staff travel, human resources support, the audit, insurance, depreciation, things of that nature. We've seen an increase in there around staff travel and support, especially including travel to board meetings and things of that nature, and also some additional training and programs for staff and others. You see translation fees have jumped up from 65 this year in the budget to around 115. And interest and bank charges have gone up as well because we have because the fees are increasing. The portion that the bank is going to take on credit card payments is also going to increase as well. And Judy, you had your hand up.
I just want to say something quickly about translation fees. The fees were perhaps a little low in terms of what our budget was for 23. And so we're updating that line item for 24, given that we have multiple exams, given that we've got lots of programming that has to be translated, and that we have an obligation, but also it's the right thing for Canada to have this in both official languages. We have done extensive reviews of other ways to potentially reduce the costs of translation. We have betaed artificial intelligence. We have betaed simultaneous translation that is automated. Those are not at the stage yet to replace the highly bespoke translation services that are required, for example, that we're benefiting from right now, but also for some of our technical work. And so we have a very competitive contracts with third-party providers in this area and are very pleased with the working relationships we have, but just understand that there are costs to provide the regulatory work for Canada in both official languages. And I see, Andrew, you have a question.
Thanks, Jude. It's a very, very minor one. Between interest and bank charges expenses, what's the breakdown? Is that basically bank charges? Only because it looks funny that we've got interest coming in and interest going out again. And again, I realize it's a rounding error, but just curious.
So of the 70, like of the 45 this year and the 75,000 projected for 2024, about 90% of that or more is credit card fees. So the 2.5% to 3% that we pay per transaction. And then the interest is or the interest and actually interest and bank charges. So we really don't pay that much interest other than non-credit card fees. So that actually probably should be charged to, that line should actually be charged to credit card and bank fees and get rid of the word interest. That's a good catch. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you.
Okay. And then down at the bottom to show how everything works. So we have total income is projected at 3.3 million with the expenses of just under 3. So the total surplus will be 350 with the potential contribution to reserves of 350, leaving a budget surplus of 46,000. So really revenue less expenses will be about 396,000. And we've kind of flagged 350 towards the reserves with a $46,000 surplus at the end. Okay.
And let me be clear about that as well, right? I mean, if there is lower than projected attrition, if we do not need to call on the contingency on the income side or contingency on the expense side, that just means more ability to contribute directly to reserves in year one, barring the need to call on the reserves immediately in year one. That would enable us to even build faster. But we just can't bank on that at the moment. So it's possible the contribution to reserves would increase, but we have a fairly conservative approach in how we've treated this.
Judah, Sean, I just want to step in just for a moment here and just provide a time check. It is 1:30. So our agenda is calling for us to wrap up at 1:30, but we haven't yet done the financial section. So we are running over time. So I just wanted to alert everyone to that, and particularly those who are joining us publicly. So not to curtail the discussion, it is important, but wanting us to be aware of the time commitment. Okay, that's all.
All right. Thanks, Ruth. And the I guess for the September information, that can be very quick, mainly just questions if anybody has questions on it. Okay. And then the final slide in this package is just the projected statement of financial position or balance sheet. And really the items that I wanted to highlight here are the cash at the top. You'll see we've got budgeted for 296,000 and the GIC of 500,000. So really the GIC balance at the end of 2024 really reflects the lion's share of what will be hopefully the surplus at the end of the year that is contributed to the reserves. And then you'll see down the bottom here, I don't know if you can see my mouse or not, but the total net assets of 686,000. Right above that is the 396 that carries down from the previous page with the statement of operations. Okay.
Can I just quickly ask again to the so the deficit that we're running this year, that comes out of operating cash flow from this year?
Yes. Yep. So the forecast base for the remainder of the year was a small $14,000 deficit of expenses slightly exceeding revenues. So at the beginning of 2023, our net assets or reserves were just over 304,000. And then if we have if the forecast falls true, it'll be a downshift of about 14,000 to leave us at 290 to start for next year.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions on the budget presentation? Okay, I will stop sharing.
So I think, Ruth, that the only item is whether there are any questions about our financial statements that are in the materials. Other than that, I think that would conclude the public part of our meeting.
Oh, that was a great presentation, Sean, on the approach to budgeting, and I think helping everybody to understand how we do this important work. And what I really appreciate, Sean, is the way that I really have confidence in the way that you are managing all of these moving parts, particularly with a brand new organization where we don't have years of runway to rely on. So good for you. You are being agile and forward thinking in the way you're approaching this. Judah, Sean, staff, it's really, really great to see. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
So just a
Any
quick
questions
note,
for Sean? Sorry, any questions for Sean? I'm not seeing any. How about on the financial statements and highlights, everything that was provided in the package, the quarterly updates? Are there any questions for Sean or Judah on any of that material? Okay, seeing none, the next section in our agenda is other business. There was no other business brought to my attention in advance, and I'm just going to quickly scan the room. Is there any other business that anyone feels a need to bring forward? Okay, seeing none, then I will call for a motion to adjourn our public board meeting. Karima, thank you so much. Someone to second that motion. Amber, thank you. Is there anyone opposed to the motion to adjourn? And seeing none, that motion is carried. So for board members, let's take a 5-minute bio break before we move into the in-camera section of our meeting. And for all of you who joined us publicly, thank you so much. We are really pleased and honored to be sharing the good work that this regulator is doing on behalf of the profession. Thank you so much.